The transition from kinetic survival to systemic sustainability was a heavy, exhausting friction that ground against the teeth of the new world. In the wake of the runaway freight train's successful interception at the Western Perimeter Gate, the Spark Gap Alliance did not pause to celebrate. The 600 tons of raw phosphate fertilizer and automated soil processing units were not abstract wealth to be recorded on a digital balance sheet. They were massive, physical packages of survival that had to be hauled, distributed, and integrated by hand into an architectural layout that was still settling into its new horizontal reality. The Western Staging Yard had transformed into an immense, open-air logistics hub. The air was thick, a dense, swirling atmosphere where the bitter, aerosolized charcoal of the lower tenements mixed with the heavy, sweet, earth-like aroma of the unrefined phosphate compounds. Overhead, the jagged edges of the fallen high spires remained permanently wedged into the structural iron framework of the mid-sector machine shops, forming a chaotic ceiling of fractured marble and exposed titanium support girders. Rivers of glowing violet and gold Tartarian current pulsed unthrottled through the split concrete floor plates, casting a warm, constant illumination across the faces of the thousands of workers who were manually unloading the heavy steel cargo cars. Cody stood at the intersection of the primary rail line and the access ramp to the mid-sector hydrodocks, his heavy leather work boots anchored firmly in a pool of dark, iridescent hydraulic fluid. His hands were raw, his palms mapped with fresh blisters and dark carbon soot from the high-voltage jumper cables he had manually forced into the track-switching grid only hours before. Within his irises, the geometric rings of his third eye glowed with a deep, quiet amber intensity, allowing his awareness to continuously parse the immense structural and fluidic stresses running through the sector's battered infrastructure. He didn't see the ruin as a localized disaster. He parsed it as a vast, overpressurized workshop that was desperately hunting for a proper mechanical balance. The distribution logistics are bottlenecking at the primary vertical lift shafts, Mara reported, her voice carrying a sharp, gravelly strain as she stepped up beside him. She dropped a heavy, double-insulated telemetry module onto the iron routing table between them, her industrial prosthetic arm clicking rhythmically as its high-contrast thermal lenses calibrated to the shifting ambient heat of the yard. "We've got the raw materials, Cody, but the primary botanical spires, the elite's old private agricultural glasshouses, did not clear the structural compression when the towers dropped. They smashed clean through the upper reservoirs of the mid-sector hydrodocks. Right now, 3 million gallons of hyperoxygenated nutrient fluid are trapped behind a series of locked, automated biodomes." Mara tapped the screen of her handheld receiver, displaying a crude, wireframe schematic of the compromised agricultural sector. The corporate network's emergency protocols have sealed the dome valves to prevent what the mainframe classified as lower-tier biological contamination, she continued, pointing to a flashing crimson node deep within the structural fracture. Because the seals are locked tight and the internal automated circulation pumps are still running at maximum capacity, the localized atmospheric pressure inside the glass house is hitting critical thresholds. The hyperoxygenated air is mixing with methane pocket venting from the crushed low-tier sewage mains directly beneath the foundation. It's turned the entire botanical sector into a literal explosive device. If the pressure differentials aren't balanced within the next 40 minutes, the resulting thermal ignition will vaporize 3 adjacent residential tenements and contaminate the entire Western water recycling grid with toxic mineral slag. The automated systems are hunting for a software deletion command that doesn't exist anymore, Cody said, his eyes scanning the wireframe layout, his mind instantly translating the abstract digital alarms into the practical, tangible reality of fluid dynamics and physical plumbing. They're trying to manage a closed-loop system using parameters from a vertical hierarchy that has already collapsed. It's like trying to run an industrial engine with a completely blocked exhaust line and an uncalibrated fuel pump. The pressure has nowhere to go, so the mixture just loads up until the block cracks. Then we break the glass, a cold, smooth baritone suggested from the dark perimeter of the staging ramp. The Vampire King stepped into the light of the amber ley lines, his long black cloak sweeping across the grease-stained concrete like a shadow made solid. The midnight black eclipse blade hung loosely in his right hand, its central crystallized vein drinking the ambient static of the yard, pulsing with a deep, rhythmic crimson that seemed to match the low-frequency thrum of the first core. The Immortal's pale features held an expression of pure, revolutionary disdain as he looked at the schematic of the sealed corporate glasshouse. For 5 centuries, those hanging gardens hovered over our heads, dropping nothing but their toxic pesticide runoff and their discarded luxury rinds into our drainage ditches, the king whispered, his eyes flashing with a predatory crimson. My people have already scaled the external structural struts of the dome. They are waiting for my signal to tear the white ceramic panels from the framework and let the fresh air in. If your people breach that glass without balancing the pressure first, the sudden rush of external oxygen will hit the trapped methane pocket like a spark dropped into an open fuel cell, Cody warned, his voice level, steady, and carrying an absolute mechanical clarity that instantly halted the Immortal's forward stride. The resulting explosion won't just kill your climbers, it will shatter the primary hydro pumps and leave the entire horizontal alliance without a drop of clean water for the next 6 months. You don't clear an overpressurized line by punching a hole in the middle of the pipe. You go to the primary intake, you isolate the ground, and you force the circulation to open up safely. Physical path to that primary intake is completely obstructed, Lork rumbled, his colossal bronze undian chassis stepping forward from the cargo line. The Vanguard leader's single functional arm held a massive 12-pound industrial sledgehammer across his chest armor, his internal pneumatic pistons venting a short, high-pressure burst of steam that cleared a small circle in the gray fog around his boots. His vertical amber lenses clicked into a tight, focused alignment as he looked at Cody. The compression has dropped a 60-ton section of reinforced marble walkway directly over the main filtration column access hatch. The structure is under immense kinetic torque. One wrong movement, and the remaining support pillars will buckle, burying the entire intake facility under 1,000 tons of high-tier masonry. Then we bring the right tools, and we handle the weight manually, Cody said, his jaw tightening as he slung his heavy tool wrap over his shoulder. He looked at Lork, then at the Vampire King, his golden irises locking them into a single, cohesive operational unit. Mara, bring the manual telemetry leads and monitor the pressure drops from the secondary distribution manifold. Lork, you're on structural bracing. King, clear the path. We aren't letting this city burn itself out from the inside. The trek into the fractured heart of the mid-sector hydrodocks was a journey through a surreal, mechanical jungle. The structural collision had forced the elite's pristine botanical laboratories directly into the heavy, functional architecture of the lower pumping stations. Colossal, century-old oak trees, their roots genetically modified to draw nutrients from pure liquid data streams, had burst through the iron floors of the maintenance tunnels, their silver-veined leaves dripping synthetic sap onto the rusty, high-pressure steam pipes below. The atmosphere was in suffocating, hyperpressurized mist that tasted of copper, raw sulfur, and the intensely sweet, artificial fertilizer compounds that had once fed the private orchids of the corporate directors. As they reached the primary filtration facility, the scale of the structural crisis became terrifyingly clear. A massive, 3-story column of white marble architectural stone, a piece of a fallen director's private viewing mezzanine, lay smashed across the main access deck, its heavy weight pinning the massive iron hatch of the filtration column shut. The marble column was vibrating violently, groaning under the immense, unseen pressure of the trapped gases pulsing through the plumbing lines directly beneath it. We have movement, Mara called out, her digital eye spinning at maximum velocity as she checked her handheld receiver. The internal pressure inside the primary biodome just cleared 5 atmospheres. The methane concentration is hitting critical density. Cody, the automated security governors inside the column, have initialized an emergency liquidation routine. They're deploying the Chrysalis drones to purge the infrastructure of any unregistered biological mass before the system reaches thermal ignition. From the dark, fractured spaces between the smashed marble pillars, a dozen automated security units emerged. They were terrifying, arachnid-like constructs composed of polished white ceramic and high-tier chrome, their central sensor pods strobing with an erratic, violent purple static. Unlike the heavy logistics units Cody had rewired in the staging yard, these drones were specialized internal defense mechanisms, their multi-jointed limbs tipped with high-frequency kinetic blades that whistled through the pressurized mist with a lethal, rhythmic precision. A machine that fights for a dead master is nothing but a monument to old arrogance, the Vampire King laughed, his long black cloak snapping through the steam as he lunged forward without a trace of hesitation. The midnight blade of the Eclipse blade swept through the pressurized air in a magnificent, horizontal arc, its crimson vein flaring with an aggressive, hungry light as it met the lead drone's kinetic cutters. The collision was a deafening clatter of iron and ceramic, sending a shower of white-hot kinetic sparks raining across the wet stone floor. The king did not retreat. He moved with an immortal, fluid speed that defied the physical density of the choked tunnel, his blade carving through the chrome-articulated joints of the security constructs with a predatory efficiency, leaving a trail of smoking silver data fluid mixing with the rising green moisture of the floor plates. "Lork, secure the leverage points on the main hatch," Cody commanded, his golden eyes fully dilated as his third eye mapped out the precise structural stress lines running through the fallen marble mezzanine. "The frame is ready," Lork bellowed, his colossal bronzandian chassis charging into the gap cleared by the king. The Vanguard leader dropped his sledgehammer, driving his single mechanical arm beneath the crushed titanium framework of the access deck. His internal pneumatic systems shrieked in mechanical agony, his rewired power lines venting brilliant bursts of blue grounding static directly into the wet stone as he braced his multi-ton frame against the descending weight of the 60-ton marble column. "Move, Cody. The load is shifting. I can only hold the clearance for less than 2 minutes before the primary seal fractures." Cody did not hesitate. He slid beneath the vibrating mass of the lifted column, his heavy work boots slamming against the iron rungs of the primary filtration hatch. To any conventional corporate engineer, the massive, circular valve assembly before him was an inaccessible, encrypted labyrinth of automated electronic solenoids and proprietary hydraulic locks. But to Cody, whose consciousness operated on the absolute blueprint of practical, hands-on mechanical utility, the crisis was an entirely tangible problem of flow, circulation, and structural balance. He didn't see an encrypted corporate security matrix. He recognized the basic, unalterable geometric laws of fluid dynamics and physical load distribution. An intuitive, sovereign understanding of utility he had developed through years of professional experience across high-volume manufacturing and fast-paced food service lines, where keeping a complex system running under an immense physical load was the only thing that mattered. He remembered the foundational architectural layouts he had meticulously designed for his Manifest Greatness Laundromat School framework, a conceptual model built entirely on the absolute sovereignty of independent fluid inlets, clean structural circulation, multi-stage filtration loops, and reliable manual overrides that could be operated by hand when the digital infrastructure completely failed. He recalled the pure, unlinked geometric current paths he had first explored as a child during his time in the gifted and talented education program at Keene Elementary School in Wooster, Ohio. You don't try to stop the pressure, you build a calibrated path for the circuit to complete. The automated electronic solenoids are holding the main filtration gates shut because they're hunting for a closed network signal from the central Spire servers, Cody shouted up to Mara, his voice calm, level, and carrying a resonant mechanical authority that instantly focused the frantic movements of the team. "They're running lean." And the high-frequency static feedback from the broadcast tower is locking the relays in the closed position. It's exactly like troubleshooting a damaged crankshaft position sensor plug or a short RAM air intake harness on an old project vehicle in a dark garage. You don't wait for a digital diagnostics program to clear the code. You find the physical ground, and you force the loop to open up by hand. Cody pulled his heavy, unpolished iron spanner from his tool wrap. He didn't waste time attempting to interface with the digital control panel. Instead, he applied the flat edge of the iron tool directly to the primary hydraulic bypass valve's retention pin, balancing his physical weight against the lever with a calculated, steady pressure that utilized the natural geometry of the mechanical assembly. With a brutal, rhythmic sequence of heavy manual strikes, Cody slammed the iron spanner against the solenoid housing, shattering the delicate white ceramic security relays into a dozen pieces. The high-voltage digital circuits shorted out instantly, releasing a brilliant spray of violet electrical static that rolled harmlessly across the insulated fabric of his sleeves. Mara injected the manual telemetry dampener straight into the secondary circulation lines behind the main intake conduit, Cody commanded, his golden irises flaring with a concentrated burst of spatial awareness as he manually grabbed the massive, hot copper manual override wheel of the primary filtration pump. We aren't trying to dump the reservoir all at once. We're going to route the trapped methane gas through the secondary industrial wash loops to scrub the mixture before it hits the open atmosphere. The line is opening, Cody, Mara shouted back from the upper platform, her mechanical arm whirring as she forced the manual bypass pins into the secondary distribution manifold, her teeth bared against the violent vibrations of the high-pressure plumbing. The feedback is hitting maximum structural thresholds. The pressure is dropping inside the main biodome, but the macrofluidic flow is turning the main pump housing into a furnace. Beneath Cody's feet, the massive iron filtration column began to shake with a deafening, low-frequency roar. The trapped hyperoxygenated nutrient fluid and the highly volatile methane gas were finally released from their locked corporate parameters, rushing through the rewired multi-stage wash loops with the force of a localized hurricane. The thick, braided copper mainlines turned white-hot within seconds, the internal insulation melting away as the raw Tartarian current from the first core grounded itself safely through the massive, cast-iron framework of the mid-sector machine shops. "Hold the stance, Lork," Cody yelled, his hands burning through his thick work gloves as he manually held the primary override wheel open against the immense physical back pressure of the circulating fluid. "Give it 5 more seconds to complete the cycle." Above him, Lork roared, a monumental mechanical sound of absolute defiance. The Vanguard leader's bronze-andiron chassis was buried to the knees in shattered marble dust, his pneumatic leg cylinders venting blinding plumes of white steam as he held the 60-ton column perfectly steady against the kinetic torque of the opening valves. His internal gears ground together with a harsh, agonizing screech, but his grip on the structural framework remained completely unyielding. Suddenly, with a sharp, echoing clatter that resonated through the entire depth of the maintenance tunnels, the primary pressure gauges on Mara's handheld receiver dropped out of the crimson danger zone and settled firmly into a stable, peaceful green alignment. The trapped methane gas had been safely pulled through the secondary filtration loops, neutralized by the high-volume water circulation, and vented through the massive industrial cooling stacks of the lower tier as a clean, harmless mist of pure water vapor. The hyperoxygenated nutrient fluid was no longer a trapped, volatile threat. It was now flowing smoothly through the horizontal distribution grid, filling the independent cultivation zones of the lower tenements with a rich, sustainable life source that could feed the Alliance for generations. The deafening roar of the overpressurized pumps died down into a powerful, rhythmic, and perfectly balanced hum that echoed safely through the reinforced iron structures of the unified city. Lork slowly, carefully eased his structural torque, lowering the shattered marble mezzanine column onto a series of permanent, heavy steel safety blocks that the manufacturing vanguards had managed to slide beneath the framework. The Vanguard leader stepped back from the hatch, his vertical amber lenses clicking into a wide, relaxed angle as his internal systems vented a long, peaceful sigh of structural relief. The Vampire King walked back through the clearing mist, his midnight black Eclipse blade sheared cleanly into its scabbard. Around him lay the deactivated, silent fragments of the Chrysalis drones, their white ceramic armor plates completely dark, their gold lenses no longer hunting for a biological target. The Immortal looked at the flowing nutrient conduits, a genuine, revolutionary respect softening the ancient lines of his pale face. The hanging gardens have finally touched the earth, the king whispered, looking at Cody as the builder climbed out of the primary filtration hatch. They believed their equations could hold the fruit of the world out of the reach of the hands that tended it. They forgot that the roots always belong to the ground. Cody pulled off his scorched work gloves, his face covered in dark soot and industrial oil, his chest heaving as the golden rings within his irises settled back into a quiet, permanent warmth. He looked down at his scarred hands, then looked out through the cleared access deck toward the vast, horizontal expanse of the Spark Gap Alliance. The people of the lower tiers were already moving into the newly stabilized botanical sector, carrying the soil processing tools and the raw phosphate fertilizer from the freight train, working alongside one another without a single corporate spreadsheet or asset manager to dictate their worth. They were no longer survivalists hiding in the dark drainage channels. They were builders, mechanics, and farmers who had just claimed the sovereign right to cultivate their own future. The lines are clear, and the circulation is stable, Cody said, his voice carrying the calm, unyielding strength of an architect who had permanently mastered the geometry of his own floor. He picked up his heavy iron spanner, sliding it securely back into his tool wrap as the first clean, open-air breeze from the newly opened biodomes rolled across the staging deck. Let's get those seeds in the ground. We've got a whole world to feed.